Hi there and welcome back to IELTS with Rashid. This video is all about speaking part 3 and I'll give you some of the wonderful tips to sail through it. Let's get going. We'll first see what a speaking part 3 is like, what types of questions you will come across, and some of the very useful tips to do well on them. And lastly, a sample answer of a band 9. Alright, so let's first see what this test is actually about. This part lasts about 4 to 5 minutes. The questions in part 3 are of abstract nature. The topic for the questions is connected to the topic you were given in part 2. The questions can be related to causes, advantages, issues, opinions, etc. The examiner's questions will encourage you to express your thoughts, feelings, and opinions. You will only be assessed on your English language skills, so not on the content of what you actually say. Expect some of the questions to be very challenging. Look at these examples. So what do you think is the difficulty level? As you can see in these questions, you must expect some of the questions to be challenging. The purpose of this final part of the speaking test is to push your language to the limit of its ability. The examiner needs to do this in order to accurately assess the full extent of your English language skills. You won't be expected to give a long talk in answer to each question, but your answers will need to be longer than in part 1. You can develop them with explanations and examples. There are 6 common types of IELTS Speaking Part 3 questions. Let's have a look at them. It's very important to understand what they are. Understanding these types of questions will help you choose the right vocabulary and sentence structures. The first one is related with opinion. Being asked to give your opinion is one of the most straightforward question forms in IELTS Speaking Part 3. These questions start with, do you think, etc. You can use these expressions that I'm showing you on the screen to give your opinion. The second one is hypothetical questions. These are about unreal or imaginary situations. For example, if the number of elderly citizens keeps increasing, what effect do you think it will have on young adults' employment? To answer a hypothetical question, you'll need to use the conditional sentences. The clue is that little word if. The next one is compare and contrast. That's the third type of question. It's very common in IELTS Speaking Part 3 and it's to compare and contrast. For example, what are the advantages of living in a city compared to living in the countryside? Here's the language that you can use to answer this type of question, to compare and contrast. The fourth one is questions that are about the change. The questions about change ask you to talk about the past and the present. For example, how have families changed over the last 100 years? The next one is future. You may also get a question asking you to speculate about the future. For example, do you think computers will completely replace paper books in future? The last one is benefits. Our sixth and final type of question, common in IELTS Speaking Part 3, asks about benefits. It could be the benefits of a particular situation or the benefits of one thing over another. For example, what do you think are the benefits of keeping pets? Alright, so many students struggle with this part. They say, what if they couldn't understand the question of the examiner? They also show concern about the nature of the questions as they tend to be different from the questions of part 1 and part 2. If you look at the nature of IELTS speaking test, you will see that the test is designed to test how well you speak. It doesn't test how much you know about the world. So you can expect that there won't be any questions that are beyond your knowledge or understanding. You can answer all the questions without having any specialist knowledge, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about the abstract nature of the questions. Having said that, it is still possible that you may come across any question that you don't have any personal experience of. Just be honest and say exactly that. Like, I don't know about that, but I suppose. And when you start explaining, so you would be explaining whatever you suppose and speculate. Even this is an answer. Alright, so you can ask the examiner if you don't understand the question. I mean, if the examiner says something and you couldn't understand, simply ask the examiner. You can request the examiner to repeat the question. You can even ask the examiner any word or term that you couldn't understand. However, it would not be polite if you overdo it. Don't hesitate to make a guess if you're not sure about what could be an appropriate answer. Just add a language of speculation in your sentences and expressions. Remember, you must answer all the questions. You cannot skip any one of them. You can take your natural time to think and speak, just like you do in your everyday life. When a question is asked, of course, one has to think and gather ideas before speaking. Uttering some senseless sentences first and then thinking later would be a disaster. You can use some expressions of time takers like, it's difficult to say, but I'm not sure about that, but I guess. However, do not overuse them. One more way to keep talking is speaking what you believe. If you try to pick ideas from your own life, you would be able to add details and examples, and quite naturally, this would improve your speaking. This will also make your answers true to life and your communication natural. Another tip is that don't give short answers like in part 1. You should provide long and explained answers with 3 or 4 sentences. Try to give some reasons that will define your specific point of view. You can also conclude your speech with your last sentence. Try to stay accurate in your language. If you want to use a fancy word, make sure that you know the exact meaning of it. Otherwise, that might reduce your score. If you use a word that you are not very familiar with, you will more likely use it in the wrong context. It will be out of place and the examiner will reduce your marks. It is better to talk in the words that you are perfectly comfortable with and use in your own everyday life. Don't give memorized talks. Please, giving memorized answers is not a good idea. You should not provide answers that you have prepared beforehand. Rather, you should start practicing well before your examination so that you are used to giving answers naturally. Don't think to tell something which will match with the IELTS examiner's ideas. You can talk about your views even if you feel like the examiner won't like them. There is no criteria to mark your opinions during the speaking test. One more thing. You can both agree or disagree to the question asked during the test. It is not necessary to always agree. The opinions expressed in the questions are not what the examiners believe or think. It is simply a chance for you to display your own language skills. Using examples. Wherever appropriate, try to give examples in your answers. It can be an easy way to develop IELTS Speaking Part 3 answers. You can do this for many different types of questions. Giving an illustration can also be a simple way of introducing a different tense into your answer, as it could be something that happened in the past, or a current situation, or something that will happen in future, although you won't have time to go into much detail. So better to just give example and then close the answer. The most challenging part of the part 3 could be that the questions are of abstract nature. Many students tend to struggle with this part 3. They are a little scared that the type of questions and the nature of the question is slightly different from that of part 2 and part 1. So they probably think that they wouldn't be able to do well on these questions. Even if you have had the opportunity to talk extensively in English, you're most likely to have talked less about abstract ideas in your life. I mean, you almost certainly won't have spent much time discussing abstract ideas. You need to prepare yourself by practicing this. This will get you used to developing these types of answers quickly and effectively.
Is it considered important in your country to learn foreign languages?
More than just important, it's considered essential. The English poet John Donne said, "No man is an island." And I think in this day and age, that is also true of countries. We are all intricately connected. A country that wants to do business abroad and export its goods has to know how to communicate with foreigners, and that means speaking foreign languages.
What, in your opinion, is the best way to learn a language?
Undoubtedly, the best way is to go and live in a country where the language is spoken as a native language. But that is not enough. I have friends who have done just that, but they stuck together with people who spoke their language, and so they hardly learnt anything. You have to immerse yourself completely in the language and the culture. This takes courage, but is well worth the effort. One of my friends went to study in England and got an English boyfriend. Her English improved dramatically in just a few months, so arguably that's the best way.
Why are some people seemingly better at learning languages than others?
It's true that some people seem to pick up language really easily. Being bilingual from a young age certainly helps, because the more languages you speak, the more easily you acquire a new one. Another major factor is motivation. Two people can study the same materials for the same number of hours, but the person who is more motivated will learn more and remember better what they learned. I really believe that the more you care about learning a language, the more effortlessly you will pick it up.
How do people in your country feel about English being the world language?
I don't think most people feel anything exactly. They just see it as something inevitable. They don't fight it because that would just leave them trailing behind other countries that embrace English as the global lingua franca. Not learning English would leave us economically disadvantaged.
Do you think the culture of English-speaking countries, as well as the English language, dominate the world?
The rise of the internet has certainly increased the dominance of English, and therefore also the spread of English and American ways of seeing the world. I think we are all expected to conform. Also, the majority of young people in my country like to watch American films and listen to American music. It's considered trendy to do so. So, yes, I would definitely say that the culture of English-speaking countries holds much sway all over the world.
Why do you think people feel it is important to continue speaking their local languages?
There's a backlash in some quarters against the spread of English. One way this is expressed is by the insistence of maintaining local languages. A local language is more than just words. It links a community with its past, with its heritage. And so if you stop speaking your language, you lose a part of yourself.
The final tip is that nothing is complete without practice. You know everything theoretically, but if you don't put that into practice, there's no way you can improve. So you have to improve with practice. This is Rashid signing off, and I'll see you in the next video.